For those who do not know me, mi nombre es Moises Moreno Rivera. My name is Moises Moreno Rivera, and I humbly serve the state of California as Cali PA's Deputy Secretary for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations. And I am joined here by my colleague. Who would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Chloe. I also work with Moy in the Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations Unit. My pronouns are she, her, and very happy to be here. Thanks so much for joining.
The clicker's not working, by the way. I realize that this slide does not include information about interpretation and translation services. I do want to turn it over to our interpreter that's online, and I want to make sure that folks that may speak Spanish have an opportunity to hear how they could obtain language services in Spanish. So I'll turn it over to Carlos, who I believe is joining us, to provide that information. Apologies, Joel. We'll sort out this language piece in a second. It seems that 3 years after starting all of this digital stuff, we would have our stuff together. We're good? Perfect.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Our apologies for the technical issue. Una disculpa por el problema técnico. Para quienes nos acompañan presencialmente, hay dispositivos de interpretación disponibles en la sala. Solo es necesario que lo soliciten y automáticamente escucharán cualquier comentario en inglés interpretado al español. For those of you in person, there are headsets available in the room. Para quienes nos acompañan vía Zoom, en un momento después de este aviso se va a reiniciar la interpretación. En ese momento sería necesario que se desplacen a su barra de controles, donde aparece su micrófono, video, etcétera, y ahí van a ver un icono de interpretación que parece un globito terráqueo, y le darían clic y seleccionarían español como su idioma. For those of you joining us via Zoom, right after this announcement, interpretation will be restarted. At that point, you will find an interpretation icon in your Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little world. You click on that and you select English as your language. Gracias and thank you, Moises.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Working. Hit next slide, please. Great. Again, my name is Moises Moreno Rivera, and I'm just really excited to be with you all today for this second listening session. I don't want to make any assumptions that any of you on the call know the breakup or the makeup of Cal EPA. We had the recent slide with our mission, and I just want to make sure that right now we're in Los Angeles in the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board boardroom. So we're in LA, and we're actually in a part of one of our Cal EPA families regional offices. So for those that are unfamiliar with Cal EPA's breakup, the California Air Resources Board, Cal Recycle, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, Department of Toxics and Substances Control, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, which, by the way, hosts Cal EnviroScreen for those that are familiar with the tool, and the water boards are all part of our agency umbrella. So we're very thankful to the LA Regional Board staff for hosting us and for being here today. So thank you. Really, really appreciate the hospitality. We wanted to make sure that we had a venue that had hybrid capabilities so that we would, be able to connect with you all more broadly. So again, making no assumptions here, just getting you familiar a little bit more with our agency. So why are we here today? We have a brand new EJ grants program, EJ Action Grants program, and the legislature appropriated $25 million to our agency. And one of the things that you may be familiar with our agency is the Cal EPA EJ Small Grants. And one of the beauties of those grants is it really allowed a lot of small community partners, small organizations to really obtain access, obtain funds to do projects, on the ground, and to really, really get started on addressing issues within their communities. This program builds on that. We have the beauty of this program, however, is that we have a capacity of $300,000 as opposed to $50,000 with a fiscal sponsor or an applicant per fiscal year to apply up to $500,000. And this is one of those big changes, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to make sure that that's one of those one of the biggest changes that we're seeing as part of this funding. There is a little caveat here, which is kind of which I'm really, really excited about, is this program itself focuses on 4 key areas. This is per the legislative language, where we're really looking at how we as an agency, how you as communities, how folks that are involved in emergency preparedness and addressing matters on public health, and how we improve our decision-making, and how we ultimately strengthen our enforcement, how we are working together, how communities are really defining those issues collectively with local partners, how you're really seeing how, how this money could be used to further advance environmental justice within your communities. One of those pieces about this is that one of the exciting things about this is that Governor Newsom earlier this, actually, I was going to say earlier this year, but it's almost a year now. Wow, time flies. In September of last year, signed an executive order N1622. This executive order is on embedding equity and is asking all state agencies under the administration to really start thinking through as to all the changes they could be making to policies, procedures, investments to really address historic and present day inequities. And Cal EPA, as part of this EJ Action Grants program, interpreted that executive order to say that we wanted to make sure that the existing government code for environmental justice, that how the state defines environmental justice was going to be one of those core elements for this program. And that the 4 criteria that were mandated by the legislature had this EJ component to all of those areas. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chloe, to talk about eligibility.
As current draft guidelines stand, we will accept applications from federally recognized tribes, 501c3 nonprofits, and organizations receiving fiscal sponsorship from 501c3 organizations.
Again, there was questions in the first listening session surrounding, eligibility, who can apply. We had heard whether communities, small communities, very similar to the EJ Small Grants, if they could apply. And, the third bullet is really where we're trying to encapsulate that piece. If others have found other best practices as to how smaller organizations and how folks are receiving, and other grant programs are going about receiving funds, please let us know, inform us. We wanna learn, and we wanna make sure that we're making it as easy as possible. In the spirit of making things easier, and in the spirit of making facilitating grants application process for the new EJ Action Grants Program, we've heard loud and clear, not only through our boards, departments, and office, also through our participation in the Strategic Growth Council, that technical assistance, community capacity, community readiness is a challenge across the state for environmental justice communities. And that there's folks that may pay for a consultant to apply for a grant, and they ultimately don't get it. And paying for a consultant does not guarantee that you'll receive funding. And we've heard that it's very disheartening to go through a process, work with community partners, build coalition, and then ultimately not receive funding. So in that spirit, we wanted to see what can we do as part of this new EJ Grants program to facilitate this process. And so we heard that, you have the existing supplemental environmental projects, the program where there's community partners that have already identified solutions locally. To clarify from the first listening session, the first piece that we heard was, are you then allowing polluters, you're using state dollars to pollute, and for using state dollars to, instead of polluters to pay their fair share? I wanted to clarify that piece today, where what we really wanted to, and clarify that up front, what we really want to say is this: the matchmaking between a polluter and a community sometimes doesn't happen within a year, right? It doesn't happen within months, where there may be a polluter that, there may be a community that has identified a solution, and there is no enforcement actions during their time period. And as a result, that's delayed justice. So we wanted to see, if we have the ability for an identified SEP list that matches the 4 criteria, either one of those 4 criteria, whether it's for public health, whether it's for enforcement, or all 4, and it is addressing an environmental injustice, how can we work with you? How can we work with you on an approved, if you're already on an approved SEP list as of June 30th per these draft guidelines, how can we work with you to ensure that you're eligible to be able to be considered for this funding? So that's really that first piece of the grant application, is how do we break down for those who have already identified projects through that program. The second piece is, if you've already applied to a Cal EPA board, department, or office for funding, and the grant program that you may have applied for them is consistent, or there's overlap with the EJ Action Grants Program existing draft guidelines, how can we work with you to identify whether or not that information could be used, How can we work with you to ensure that you have, those pieces that we clarify what's needed, and that we use that application to be reviewed under the scoring criteria and under the rubric that we have for this program. So again, in the spirit of, for those who have already done the legwork to apply. For those that have not done that and you just want to apply for this new program directly, we're also offering that opportunity, right? But we really wanted to look at what legwork had been done. How can we work with folks to not add an additional burden for any expenses that were accrued in your process. So also to clarify from the first listening session is that if you are on a CEPS list and there's funding and there's funding that's you're a potential, if you're on the CEPS list and you're considered for funding, right? We wanted to make sure that once you are part of the EJ Action Grants application review process, it becomes a project under the EJ Action Grants process. So it will be administered as a grant, as a project under the EJ Action Grants program. So that's just another point of clarification from the first one. I just heard, where can you find the draft grant guidelines? I saw it in the chat. To answer that question now, our website is calepa.ca.gov/EJ Action Grants. And I believe my colleague, Jamie, is going to put that in the chat for folks and provide the link for that there. Great. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Chloe, to talk about timelines.
Thank you, Moy. So we have been in public comment period and available for tribal consultation since June 7th, and we will continue on until July 28th, which is coming up quite soon. Today is our second public listening session, and proposed in the draft guidelines currently, we have our grant solicitation period going from August 29th through October 6th, and we have also received comment to extend that. So that is something we're considering, but in current draft guidelines, August 29th through October 6th.
You hear me? Okay, great. Again, for the folks that are here in person, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Great. So this is a listening session, and we do want to make sure that we're learning about the different best practices. If you've reviewed the grant guidelines and you have clarifying questions, those are the types of questions we're trying to address today. This is really not a Q&A session, but really listening to best practices that folks have for us. This is really an opportunity for us to, in this first round, what are things that we, that we dropped the ball and we didn't include? What are some things that we should be considering right now? If you've been working with another entity and you found that their application was easy to follow, if you found that the guidelines, there's something that needs to be tweaked, please let us know. But for the process today, I do want to kind of just walk you through that of how we're going to be handling this listening session in very similar format to the first one is, if you want to provide public comment today, if you want to provide a best practice as part of this program, please raise your hand. I think Zoom now kind of puts folks in a queue for folks that are in person, right? We want to make sure that you let us know, you raise your hand, and we'll make sure to queue it up to include your public comment. For those in person, I would just, because there's folks online, I want to make sure that you use a microphone just for accessibility purposes and for the language services that are being provided, that they hear that clearly. Secondly, I want to, for folks that may be on the phone instructions, you will say your name. Well, actually, we will say your phone number because we will be able to see your name. And we will ask you to unmute. And to mute or unmute is *6. So *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute. For folks that are providing public verbal comments, public comments, in a matter to be equitable to folks' times, we want to allocate a 3-minute, just a 3-minute portion. Again, we want to make sure that we're mindful and of those that are participating virtually and here in person. So with that being said, we'll get started. Let me go back. Sorry. I'll leave the instructions there in case anyone's joining. So with that being said, let me go to, here we go. Great. So I have on cue, Canyon, Kathy, and Nicola, and seeing no raised hands in person. So I'll start with those first. So Canyon, we're going to ask you to unmute and we'll get started.
Thank you. Mishmi Tuhis, Conrad Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots. I am of Indian Canyon Nation, only federally recognized Indian country, down in the South Bay of Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Now we have our small state recognized tribal organization. We do have a tiny 501c3. However, we're so limited capacity that even when we have means, it's still very challenging. We just received a tiny grant to pay a full-time artist, and we can't even bring them on as a staff given our small capacity. So we made our artists create an LLC so we could properly hire them as an independent contractor as an LLC to make the task easier. Now, this is something that Native tribal communities that I run into all the time. Now, the closest I have to references of positive experiences has been relationship building and allies and liaisons who are either present in the organization that is providing the funding or a middle community where they offset some of the labor. So not exactly like how a consultant would just help you get along the way, but actually offset some of the labor as their task. Two amazing grant experiences our tribe and community have had was a community member who created this grant application for a project called Groundworks, and that brought in artists, tribes, and digital technological application developers. And it was also a grant for First Nations Canada territory, so I was less in the process. But what I can say is the experience was amazing because it allowed the community to continue doing the work that they were doing instead of forcing them to fit into a box to meet the criterion of things that they couldn't do. So don't ask the culture bearer to become the office manager. Don't ask the artist to become the CPA or the spreadsheet creator. Allow the people to do the work they're doing. Yes, help them understand the process, but don't expect them to hold the title. And then the same thing, another effort was with the Dock Tip Earworm, Disadvantaged Tribal Community and Integrated Water Resource Management Program, SEIA, California Indigenous Environmental Alliance. Acronyms and dyslexia don't work for me. I'm sorry. Their community was really great because they helped offset the struggles, and they followed all of the rules by saying I'm not allowed to comment on that. However, in our experience, we have witnessed other organizations do A, B, and C. So they somewhat spoke respectfully within the position they had and gave insights to the best of their ability to be the best advocates and liaisons in the position that they had. So these are examples of partial positive experiences. I don't know the solid answer because I understand if an organization member who's providing the funds is offering help, it doesn't look good. I recognize that, but I really want to remind people that it's really hard for small organizations to do the work that they're doing, but also meet all of the criterion. So I hope my comments made sense.
Yeah, thank you so much, Canyon. And it's the groundworks, looking into that, it's something that I appreciate you sharing that and really sharing the comprehensive outlook
Yeah.
and somebody who's
Yeah,
doing that.
Dancing Earth and Groundworks project,
Right.
First Nations Canada, with a gentleman from Toaster Lab who had an amazing MOU because it respected culture bearers, photographers, artists, where it wasn't just the photographer gets all the rights. No, the native peoples and the dancers and the artists all got into a comprehensive agreement, which was amazing. I love the work that they did because it respected everybody's position and culture and all that fun stuff too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Canyon. Okay, I saw that Claire, I don't know if Claire, if you lowered your hand or not, or Catherine, that you lowered your hand or not. However, on my queue now is Nicola.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words. I like idea about funding and this effort about environmental justice. But there is a bit problem. And I would like to learn about that or to consult with someone maybe later on with some letter. I just sent a comment about 20 pages yesterday to the California Energy Commission in response to the one meeting that was in Calexico on June 27, also about funding. That was Energy Commission. Now, I am complaining or writing. We have to synchronize somehow Energy Commission, California, California Natural Resources Agency, Environmental Protection Agency, Energy Commission. We have to work together on this somehow. I'm author of the proposal for the restoration of the Salton Sea. It's a huge project, about $15 billion. Can be done in 5-6 years. And now there is a lot of elements there. By the way, I'm inventor of several breakthrough technology, including solar, hydro, and geothermal. So funding for me wouldn't work because it has to go all together. Question is how to achieve that. And I'm trying to express that problem somehow. And if you can find some voice of unity, that's all three agencies that has to get together somehow and work on that plan somehow. How much time I have, by the way? It's 3 minutes. Okay, well, maybe a little bit more. Let me see. About proposal for the restoration of the Salton Sea. It is huge, and it's deal with clean environment, huge amount of potable water. That's import seawater from Sea of Cortez and from Long Beach, 2 corridors. Again, it's relatively cheap. $15 billion will produce about $500 million revenue every year just from clean energy, out of blue, literally. There's special, I'm inventor of special solar panels that have lenses, and it's several times more powerful than photovoltaic. It's a little bit thicker, and I have a reminder for myself that my time is expired. But
yes,
I will send comment, and
Thank
see
you.
somehow if we
Nicola.
can work together somehow on this one, because it's huge what I'm doing. Unfortunately, I'm a small guy. And I'm
And
not,
I appreciate your comment, Nicola, and I appreciate all of your efforts in the Salton Sea region. I was formerly with the California Natural Resources Agency, and I just appreciate the time that you take to be in these forums. So thank you, and we welcome your comment.
thank you.
I'm gonna go back to the folks in person. Is there anyone that would like to provide a comment? Yeah. We're gonna go to in person before I go back to the folks that I have in queue online. So again, thank you all for being here. And please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and the opportunity to speak today. My name is Moses Huerta, resident of City of Paramount. I'm currently working on an EPA EJ small grant as well, monitoring metals in the air. Want to build off the comment earlier of one of the speakers that I saw from the previous is one of the challenges in experiencing in small grants or engaging the community is in the either the eligible costs or indirect in building in, for example, like assisting with the translating, as you know, to engage a community. For example, my community, we have difficulty because it is a majority Spanish speaking, although they are more comfortable with that language. But you know, the goal is obviously in whatever work we're doing with the EJ grants, we want to engage the community, communicate, and also at the same time here, we want it to be as inclusive as we want. And the challenges that I've seen and experienced before, including a project that I'm starting to work on now, is that we found that as a barrier to. We were worried about costs. You know, how do we build that into the to the grant? I think it would benefit everyone if that is something that should already be built in, because that is helping. Those are resources in the grander scheme of things. Those resources that will help in the engagement of the community and communicating. Obviously, whatever the work is, and you're going to develop some information that you want to communicate it and helping with that. I think if that can be integrated, listening to that, because that has been difficult. Obviously, you know, members of the community could do their best, and as commenter online mentioned, you know, it's difficult to wear a lot of hats. You want to, you know, you want to do the work that you've been applied for the grant for, but at the same time, you want to be focused on that, not worried about these other details that overshadow what the work where you're worried about those little things. So those just as an example, but of those indirects that I think either built into the grant that's already in that can be accounted for, or reasonable, or anything in that nature, in connecting with the community and engaging them in the communication. I think that's one that just stuck out to me and from our previous session. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to make a comment.
Yeah, of course, and thank you for being here. Great. On Q Online, before I continue, again, if you're on the phone and you're just tuning in, we're now in the listening session portion of today. We have, if you're on the phone, instructions to raise your hand, *9. So please press *9 to raise your hand. We will then ask you to unmute. And in order to unmute, please press *6 to mute or unmute. And we will go from there. For folks online and for folks in person, we are holding 3 minutes, a 3-minute listening session comment period. And that is just trying to provide an equitable approach to those that are here in person and online. On my queue, we have Richard and Magali Sanchez. So I'm going to start with Richard. If you'd like to provide your public comment.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Richard Sadowski. I'm from Homefront EJ Morro Bay. And we have I'd like to kind of echo what Canyon Sayers Roots was mentioning, and how everybody has a different skill set. And what you know, one of the challenges that we've had is in the past couple of years, our group through our fiscal sponsor Ecologistics have applied for 2 Cal EPA EJ small grants, and we were unsuccessful in getting them. And part of the challenges that we in Morro Bay have is that we have just a very small pocket of what the state recognizes as a disadvantaged community. Yet we have several people that are on like myself, we're fixed income senior citizens. And one of the questions that I have is that our project, the Morro Bay Estuary Air Monitoring Project, which basically is monitoring carbon dioxide around the Morro Bay Estuary, a blue carbon area, our project is expandable. And could I use a lot of the information that we had submitted in the Cal EPA grant and just expand on that when applying for the EJ grant, which would complete our project?
That's a really great recommendation, Richard. That's something that we could consider as part of this. If this is a request that's coming from public comment to consider past applicants of EJ small grants that were unsuccessful, and if that's something that you want us to consider, I'm hearing it loud and clear from you. So thank you for raising that to us. I can't give you a yes or no now because I want to make sure that we're being attentive to all of the comments that we're receiving. But if this is something that you're asking for, we'll make sure to take that back with the team.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. What was that, sir? Oh, yeah. Great. Okay, now going to Magali.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
I just wanted to thank you for your time and also for doing these webinars are really crucial, and also for having interpretation in Spanish. I really appreciate that. That's something that the EJ EPA also started doing, and that's truly appreciated since lots of our Latino organizations, a lot of the leaders only speak Spanish, and this is truly appreciated. And I just want to say, my name is Magali Sanchez Hall. I have a movement, Emerge, and I'm an environmental justice activist. And I do some of my work on community engagement approach with the Paulo Freire sort of not method, but going into the community, first addressing the issues of the community, what they want, what they need, and the knowledge that they possess. And I'm not sure if part of this is a requirement for these grants, but I think it will be a critical component that we don't come and impose, but the community leads. And with that said, I also did some research with UCLA and DWP on what would be the best approaches for community engagement and best practices. And I found out that CBOs are not sometimes the best to go inside the community, that the best way is to identify the community leaders and go with the residents, and then you can really tackle the issues of and the burdens of the community. I'm in Wilmington, by the way, and we're like ground zero for pollution. And what I wanted to know is if this if I can implement or do some kind of scanning in the areas most affected by pollution, and that if I can basically write a proposal to do with community engagement and offer it to every organization that is planning to apply, that I think it's critical to really have a true impact in the communities.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Magali. And to your question about the types of projects, informing community residents about public health is consistent with the draft guidelines and what we're actually being asked by the legislature to include, right? And working with community members to advance that is consistent with what's currently in the draft guidelines. As to the type of project that it looks like, we're still taking public comments and we're still want to learn from you of what you want us to consider and what we, what should be in here or not. But to what I just heard from you, it's something that is consistent with what's currently proposed and what's actually being asked and requested by us from the legislature. So I want to say thank you.
No, gracias a ustedes por su gran trabajo.
Gracias a usted por estar aquí. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna, before I go back to the queue, I do want to go to the Q&A. So how do I do that? More? Here it is. So let's see. Is this a question from Hector Olivares? Is this a reimbursement grant? Currently, as it stands, it is a reimbursement grant. And it's not for lack of trying or not wanting. We wanted to, we had heard in the first listening session that why had we not considered advance pay as part of this grant program, and the money as it came and the way that it was written by the legislature, it is in reimbursement basis. So at this time, it doesn't mean that for in the future, this is something that is a top priority for us as to how we remove additional barriers. So as it stands right now, for this first initial round, it is a reimbursement grant. Kathy Buchanan asked in the bottom question, can translation of outreach materials be included in the budget as a line item cost? If it's not explicit now for eligible costs, we've heard, it is. So translation and interpretation for meetings and written materials is an eligible cost. And you could see that in section 3.2 within the draft guidelines. That's something that's currently being included. So section 3.2 as part of eligible costs. Then the question of, will there be a requirement for tribes to sign a limited waiver of tribal sovereignty? One of the things that we talked about in the listening session is that we're still working with our legal team as to the different options that we have under this program. We have worked with some of our boards, departments, and office and other departments across the administration to see how they work with tribes in this matter. And that's something that's currently being looked at as to what next steps and what steps actually can Cal EPA take in this matter. So if you have, I know the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board to a certain extent have been working with tribes on this matter. If you have identified a best practice or a department that has done something that has been positive in this way, kindly request that you send that over. If you are, or if, right now we're open for tribal consultation. So tribes, California Native American tribes can request to consult with our agency and explore that further as well. Is community engagement, so the question by Magali Sanchez Ha, is community engagement part of the Cal EPA grants requirement? We do want to make sure, and we want to prioritize projects that are, advancing environmental justice. So one of the core requirements of environmental justice is that there's meaningful community involvement in all of this. So there must be a component per the Environmental Justice Code that we're considering as part of our grant guidelines, that community engagement is part of these EJ Action Grants program. Then we have a question by Valeria La Saponara. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Please raise your hand and if I'm misstating your name. Gladly address that. If a nonprofit connected to tribal communities subcontracts part of the work to a university, would the nonprofit and the university be eligible? That's a really good question. And that's something that I would have to go back with our legal team and check. So I would, let's take that question. And we're currently drafting an FAQ of what we heard in the first listening session and what we're hearing now. And we want to make sure that, I want to make sure that that question gets addressed. That's a great point. Then anonymous attendee says, for California Native American tribes who are not federally recognized, but are recognized as 501c3s, must they also be included on the NAHC contact list? Also a question that we need to go back to. I think the way that we have it right now, I just want to clarify it. So thank you for that question. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go back to anyone in the room? Great. So on my queue, I have Robert Tranny, and then I'll go back to Richard Sadowski. I don't know, Richard, if that's a legacy hand or if you have your hand up again, but Robert Tranny, I'm going to allow you to talk. We're asking.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm from Wilmington, California, and I'm with a grassroots organization called United Wilmington Youth, who is co-working with United Harbor Area Association. United Harbor Area Association was created for its 501c3, and we do have community engagement, and we're new to the EJ community. I guess my question would be, even though we're not a regular 501c3 that has a lot of clout like your Boys and Girls Clubs or other organizations that may be strong or have years of experience or years of existence. But we started as a grassroots organization. We formulated a nonprofit so we could sustain organization and get right now, because being in Wilmington, we're surrounded by 5 refineries, the Port of Los Angeles, diesel trucks, container yards, and noise pollution. And we're designated as a disadvantaged community. And our community is multifaceted. While we need a multifaceted approach, because we're predominantly Chicanos, predominantly Mexican American and first generation is the dominant raza here. So I would just like to say that this should be taken into consideration too. Even though we're a nonprofit, it doesn't actually mean that we're a CBO that has been in existence and has not been doing grassroots information and getting out the word and co-working with other organizations that are movements or what have you. So when taking consideration of Wilmington, California in particular, how would we go about getting that technical assistance? You know, we need that technical assistance to come down and help us get that funding, help us to formulate some of the programs we already have, like air monitoring that we teach our youth with computer labs and things of that nature. And is this following into, you know, what these grants are for in the environmental justice action grants? Learning the concept behind automation and how the EV trucks and some of these mechanics are going to be needed. So it's kind of a comment and kind of a question, and just to bring forthright Wilmington and United Wilmington Youth, United Harbor Area Association, and other community members and organizations that are here that need that kind of help. So I went a little bit of everywhere, but I tried to get everything in 3 minutes. Thank you.
No, thank you, Robert. To your point as to the need for technical assistance, that we've heard that in the first listening session, and it's just been very consistent as this pressing need. And I want to clarify, this is just the first round. We have $25 million in totality as part of this program. And I just want to clarify that this is just the first round. And as we're listening, as we're learning about what the needs are, we want to make sure that if within this first round of the process, if comments or some edits are not incorporated, we want to make sure that or consider them, we store them to see how we can incorporate them moving forward. I know technical assistance and community readiness and that type of funding, we've heard in the first listening session that that's a broad need. So thank you again for raising that and for being here. On cue, Richard, is that a legacy hand or do you have another comment? And this is Richard Sadowski. It's a legacy hand. Great. Okay. Let me go back to the Q&A. Marta Armas-Kelly, their question is, can the funding be allocated regionally? One of the geographic location is one element that we've heard loud and clear in the first listening session. We've heard that that there should be a broad consideration for unincorporated communities, for small communities, and that they should not be forgotten as it relates to issues in major urban areas. We've heard that that's something that they want us to prioritize, and that's something that we are prioritizing, how we make sure that there's an equitable regional distribution of funds, not only for small communities, unincorporated communities, and in and across the state. So, thank you, Marta, for that question. Ayana Johnson has a question. Ayana asked the question as, does any proposal that we send become the intellectual property of EPA once submitted? That is a great question. And that's something that we need to go back to our legal team, and we'll make sure to include as part of our team. I want to make sure that I give you the adequate response there, and they could provide that to us. So thank you for that. We also have another question from Kathy Buchanan. What is the lower end of the spending limit to qualify for reimbursement? Many low-income communities do not have the funds to cover the costs. Kathy, is there a grant program or a place that you've worked on that is a best practice of what we should be considering for the lower end of the spending limit? If you have the ability to raise your hand and to comment, and gladly go for it. Thank you.
Hello. The programs that I've worked with are federally funded, and some of the payouts have been, it just depends on what the activities have been accomplished for a quarter. So some of the payouts have been as low as, I believe, $7,000 and as high as $50,000 for the drawdowns. So, and there are a lot of communities that don't even have the $7,000 for costs up front before reimbursement. And that's where the limited sovereign waiver of sovereignty, whatever, comes into play, because there are numerous agencies within the state of California that if the agency doesn't agree with how you use the money, they won't reimburse you. So that's why I'm like very apprehensive about that requirement.
Got it. No, thank you. Thank you for raising that. We'll make sure to take this back to the team. This is important if we want to make this funding as accessible as possible. And these are existing barriers. I want to work those through. So thank you for raising that with us. There was another anonymous attendee that asked the question regarding advanced pay. To clarify, so the question is, if awarded, will some of the funding be awarded up front? Right? Will folks receive money up front? Right now, as it stands, the legislature, the language that we have from the legislature does not allow Cal EPA or does not give Cal EPA the authority to advance pay. It doesn't mean that we're not trying to address that, but at this, as it stands right now, this is a reimbursement-based grant program. Great. Others online that may have a comment? I know we have around 70 people online, around 60 or so that are not, that may be members of the public. Folks in person. Okay, so we have a question in the Q&A, and then I'll go to Seth Wilson. So in the Q&A, the question is by Richard Sadowski. The grant request include purchase equipment. Could this be an upfront payment so that the project could be implemented? For example, $25,000 for an air monitoring station. This is consistent with the question that Kathy kind of put forward about the upfront costs and how we could, get those started. So hearing this, and we also heard this in the first listening session. So this is something that we'll go back and think through. So thank you for bringing that up. If the project itself is $300,000, right, and you need the equipment to get the work done, it's one of those things that we need to consider. So let me go to Seth. Seth, you had your hand up. I don't know if you still want to provide a public comment. Seth Wilson.
Here we go. Hi, sorry, I was muted. A lot of the comments that you're receiving seem to indicate challenges in getting started with upfront capital and funding, and also hearing your comments about the state legislature and the limits placed on Cal EPA for such funding. I'm wondering if it might be possible to work across government agencies, let's say, for example, GoBiz, that could provide upfront support that would then be reimbursed with funding after the fact, and whether you've considered looking at cross-department organizations and activities or programs like that.
That's a really good recommendation, Seth. That's not something that I had considered, and now you have my brain kind of in circles. So thank you for bringing that up with me and with us today. Yes, we have an in-person commenter. Oh.
So yeah, hi, this is Susana Laguz from the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. We actually have an approved list of SEP projects. We run our SEP program though through the Rose Foundation. So then would the Rose Foundation be soliciting, taking those projects and soliciting through you? Could each individual project proponent do them through you? Then you said that they would no longer be part of the SEPS program, right? If they go into that program, but if they don't get accepted, could they go back into the SEPS, into our approved list? Or, the water boards handle SEPS a little bit differently from some of the other BDOs. So I'm sure that people in my region are going to be on our SEPS list are going to be asking this question.
Yeah, so that's something that we're currently working through with our enforcement team and our SEPS teams. That's something that we we've heard it from the different boards, departments, and office within Cal EPA that everybody handles the sepsis differently. So we actually have a pending meeting with them next week or in the coming days or so. Yeah. To address the nuance, the internal nuances as to how SEPs are administered. And that's been a conversation we've been having for the past couple of months, you know, because this is, well, we don't want to delay justice. We also understand the nuances that exist within our boards, departments, and office.
Okay, great. So will something like the Rose Foundation be there along with enforcement divisions, do you think, to hear, or will you?
That's something that we would have to work out internally before we would
Yeah.
bring the Rose
Yeah,
Foundation.
because sometimes things also, you know, if they're not firsthand, they
Right.
can get a little misinterpreted or.
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up, Susanna. Other questions? Anyone have other questions? Magali.
Yes, I have a question that I posted on the Q&A, and it's basically, I put it in Spanish to see if any of the Spanish speaker listeners are here and that they can post their Spanish questions.
The
Just
question-
okay,
Yeah,
but
I could read
what
the
about,
question if you want me to.
pardon me?
I could read the question in Spanish if you want me to, so that everybody else could hear it.
Yeah, please. And I just wanted to know if because there's a large Purepecha community here in the whole United States, and they I'm not sure. I don't think they're federally recognized, and I saw that in the guidelines. It has to. It doesn't say it must, but I wanted to know if this large community of Native people can actually apply for some of these funds.
Right. And to clarify, right, federally recognized tribes have a trust relationship with the federal government, right? It's
Mhm.
the Purepecha community. It's as part of the guidelines of how we have our relationship, in the state of California. They could be an eligible entity as if they don't have a 501c3, they could have a fiscal sponsor. They have a 501c3. If the community is working with someone, if there's an organization, they could most definitely work with them to ensure that they, a project, that they're considering is one that would be eligible for funding. But yeah, those are two separate things, and I wanted to make sure that we clarify those. But the question that you posted in the chat is in Spanish, and let me read it to everyone here for transparency's sake. So, la comunidad nativa purépecha puede aplicar por fondos para llevar a cabo un evento que se llama el trueque. La meta es concientizar sobre el uso de plásticos y el daño al medio ambiente y cómo cuidar el medio ambiente. So the question that you're posing, thank you, Carlos, for putting that there. The question that you're posing is about bringing awareness about essentially public harms, and it's consistent with the draft guidelines, that for projects that are being considered under the draft guidelines, as to as the Purepecha community itself, could they be offered federal recognition? That's because of the trust relationship and the treaty relationships that federally recognized tribes have with the federal government. That's not something that would be offered to the Purepecha community. But thank you again for bringing that up. And they are most definitely eligible for funding, but not through that matter.
Okay, thank you.
And I have Kathy, then Evangelina Barrera. So Kathy.
Yes, so with regards to the program funding, can that be the only source of funding for a project, or can we solicit numerous sources of funding for the projects? Can we have more than one funder be available?
Can you clarify that for me?
So if say the cap on a funding project is $100,000, but yet the actual cost to bring the entire project to completion is $200,000. Can we go out and solicit funds from another organization to meet the actual requirements of cost?
That's a good question, and I would need to kind of check back and see that through. Right now, as it stands, right, an applicant may request up to $300,000 from per project, right, and up to $500,000 per fiscal year. Right? So, to the nuance of your question, I would have to go back and check.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll now go to Evangelina.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. I don't know if I accidentally rose my hand.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you, Evangelina. So we have two questions in the chat. One of them is, will assessment of project outcomes be an allowable expense? I think project internal and external evaluation was not allowable expense in the previous EJ grants. Carol, can you expand on that? And if this is something that you want us to consider? I know you're asking the question, but is this something that you want us to consider as part of the EJ action grants?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, there I am. Okay. Yeah, I would definitely want you to consider it as an allowable expense. I think it's important to document best practices in a community.
Great. And Carol, do you have an example that you could share with us?
What kind of example?
Just the assessment of project outcomes, or how you've done that in the past?
Oh, you might be having a training and you want to assess whether there's been a change in knowledge and skills in your audience. And so having funding available to potentially work with a external evaluator, or be able to fund internal staff to be able to work on those aspects of the grant. And also producing, just a performance report that can be shared out with the community, because that helps support buy-in for successful projects and lessons learned.
Now, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I just, I read it, but I'm like, I want to make sure that everybody who's on the call and in person understands what that entails, just in case they want to make sure that they may have a similar comment to yours.
Thank you.
Of course. So the question from Valeria is, what's the timeline of the grants? How many years are allowed if the project is 2 to 3 years and we request up to 500K per year? Thanks. So right now, as it stands, we have up to 24 months. And after that, is working collaboratively with Cal EPA. That's what we have right now. Chloe, can you check the specific section where that's at?
So that is in section 2.3. It's currently says grants may be up for 24 months, for up to 24 months.
Right. And then to your other question, Valeria, is there a cap per applicant? Yes. So it's $300,000 per project, or up to $500,000 per fiscal year. And Chloe, can you, the specific section would be helpful.
Same section, section 2.3.
Thank you. So Ayana has another question that says, reimbursement funds are only applicable for those who are currently heavily involved in environmental justice projects because they have collateral. Are there any grants facilitated for up to the coming organizations that want to engage in projects who may not have established collateral? Ayana, may you want to provide clarity to what you're, or an example of what you're describing?
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yes. I know some organizations may have funding available where they are able to match collateral and produce what they want to do as far as a project. But some organizations are up and coming and they don't have the funding available for that. Is there a way that they have grants or opportunities for those who may not have opportunities for reimbursement where they receive the grants directly and then they can allocate that for the projects?
It's a good question. That's something that we could most definitely follow up on, but I believe
I
there's,
know I'm driving y'all crazy. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get some clarity so I can understand where we fall.
no. This is why this is important. This is precisely why we're having this listening session. And if there's anything that's not clear, we want to make sure that we clarify it, whether it's in this round or future round. So I appreciate you asking those questions and for us to be able to follow up on that. So I just thank you for being here and for sharing that. So if
Thank you. Can I say something really quickly?
Yes, of course.
A lot of organizations, they want to be involved heavily into these environmental justice practices, but they don't have the funds. A lot of us that are probably in this room come from low income communities and rural and urban communities, and we want to see a change. However, we don't have the funds to produce those changes. So we want to make an impact, but we don't have the funds to do that. Do they allow that kind of practice with the EPA? Are these opportunities? So I just wanted to kind of fill a void.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to the effect that there's communities that are not organized under a 501c3, right? If there's organizations that perhaps could partner with a fiscal sponsor to be able to see that through, that's one of those pieces that is one of the ways that folks could apply and be eligible for funding. To the effect that there's other best practices that you may have, or a way that you've partnered with other agencies or other departments that has allowed community organizations to see their grants through or to see their projects through via their programs. If you have that available to share with us, happy to take that, whether it's right now verbally, or if you could send that to us via email. We're here to learn, and we want to make sure that we do things right. And
Okay, well, I'm currently the co-chair for the East Oakland CERT, so Community Emission Reduction Plan for East Oakland. And we work with BACMed and Air Quality District, but we want to put our best foot forward, but we don't know how. So we work with partnering organizations, and we're under Dr. Fine as far as BACMed, but we want to see how we could do it collectively in our communities. So I just wanted to question that.
No, thank you for raising that. You were going to comment something?
This kind of touches on fiscal sponsorships in the application. I know that's not necessarily what you're looking for, but information on fiscal sponsors is in section 6, appendix 1. And I hear that's not the whole comment. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
On queue, I have Robert again. So Robert Trani.
Yeah, thank you. You know what just crossed my mind is that it's another comment. For many years, we're surrounded by the 5 refineries, and they're always giving money to all these community organizations right here, like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, the Chamber of Commerce. They inundate them with money, and they build on their facilities. Like one of the refineries built a pool and got the pool ready, and Olympic size and all that. And it's very difficult to get in there, but they still spent the money and got their name on there. So we were part of that little coalition receiving money from the refineries because it was a very easy task. And I used to talk to some of the EJ people and they would say, you need to stop taking that money because, you know, they're killing our people in our community with cancer and asthma and autism and all these things that are happening. And this is when I was coming to get involved with the EJ community because I knew nothing about it. So, you know, it just occurred to me that it's very easy for them to give out the money with simple applications, with a simple proposal, and just a follow-up with a few, I forgot like a wrap-up report, midterm report on each one, and just follow them. And here's the money, no strings attached. Let's just get this program that you got, and let's do this program, and we'll fund it. I mean, it was that easy. So maybe, you know, that's a playbook you guys might want to consider. And it was up to $50,000 to $500,000. We were able to collect about $10,000 from them and about 10,000 from the Port of Los Angeles with no problem. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's ways to do this with the money and the record keeping with some kind of accountability to know that this program exists, this program's going forward, and this is what they need it for, and this is what we're going to fund it for. And boom, a check was written. I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We have another question from Amanda Berger. Amanda says, hello, we work on an environmental justice education program and environmental justice / education program in 9 prisons in California. And currently we have a Cali PA grant at one of the women's prisons. Given how insular prisons are, we would love the opportunity to do cross-site visits and to learn from other groups in this movement. We're often challenged by the highly restrictive nature of government grants. It is a barrier for more community-based groups. Amanda, for the grant that you received from us and for other grants that you may have received, you know, if there's something that, you know, you strive for us to make sure that we consider to make it easier, that's why we're here. And if you want to raise your hand, happy to hear your comment.
Hi, this is Amanda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the 2 challenges for us, and you've probably heard it from other groups, one is the restricted nature of government grants can just be really very difficult for community-based organizations, particularly with the invoicing and just how restricted the rules and regulations are around expenditure of funds and staffing. That's number 1. And then I would say number 2, another challenge for us is the actual application process. And this is certainly not just in relation to your agency. I would say in general with government funds, we just struggle with the applications, and often smaller groups get knocked out of the process because we don't have the capacity to even make it through just filling out the entire application because we don't have a development department like some of the large nonprofit organizations. And I should say thank you very much for your community-based California Environmental Protection Agency grant. It's been extremely helpful to us for our work in the prisons. You're one of the only environmental funders that's recognized our work in the prisons in California. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing that. You know, it's a consistent comment that we've received. So that's something that we're taking into account. Cynthia Babich.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Been typing away in the in the chat there. So a couple of suggestions.
You see how we changed it
I'm
up?
hearing everybody. Yeah, I'm hearing everybody and I'm feeling, you know, what's going on and I understand, and I want to offer a couple of resources. One is the Center for Health, Environment and Justice. And this is an organization that Lois Gibbs, a champion of environmental justice, has put together over the years. Their website is https://chej.org. And they give a lot of help with capacity building, and the grants are fairly easy to write, and then the other thing that I wanted to say is, you know, this is a lot of money. It is, you know, the small grants from Cal EPA started off at 20,000, and then they were 50,000. And now it is a larger pot of money. And I think that, you know, based on the capacity of groups, larger amounts of money are warranted. And so I think that maybe an exploration of a set aside of all this money that you guys are giving out, so that you can either do trainings for people where they can learn how to write a proposal, what funders are looking for, or just smaller grants that are simplified. And I would be more than happy to help you explore some of those ideas. But I think you're hearing it, I'm hearing it, Chloe's hearing it loud and clear. People need help, and they're ready to activate and be a part of the movement and make their communities better, but they need some help, and we should figure out how to do it. If it's not this fund, there are other resources out there. So let's put that in our hopper and do some thinking on that at some point. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for sharing that. And yes, it's it's loud and clear, and that's one of those elements that we heard in the first listening session. I know some folks asked us to connect more further with the Strategic Growth Council to see how you know, the best practices that they've developed and other agencies. So that's something that you know, that we do want to explore. And Cynthia, thank you for offering to be a partner in this and kind of helping us think through. You know, we want to make sure that whether it's this round or future rounds, that we're removing barriers as much as possible. So thank you for being here. Brenna, Brenna Human or Human, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, sorry. Your question is, has Cal EPA considered a simplified, standardized, universal application form? That is something that we are considering, not for this round. In fact, when I joined the agency, it was at the cutoff of the fiscal projections for the following year, or projects that I could, contracts that I could do for the following fiscal year, or during the past fiscal year, sorry. And we are pursuing a grant management system to provide a simplified application process for future rounds. So right now that's currently underway. Unfortunately, because of the time when I arrived and kind of seeing that through to the time that we could actually identify a potential company to partner with to do this for us, it didn't give us enough time during then. So we anticipate that for future rounds, we will have a grant management system that will have an easier way to manage our grants. I also want to make sure that for this process that any applications during this time around, that we were able to transfer the information to the new grant management system. We do want to offer that. As to a standardized universal application form, we used a template of our grant guidelines and our grant application from, I believe it was RLF, or an organization that had put in a template of how government agencies should simplify applications and how government agencies should have just simpler templates. That is one of the strategies that was used by the team. And we took that to heart. I can't remember if that was the organization itself, but I know that there was a template that was used specifically on recommendations that we had heard from others. Laura Jones has a question, and the question, give me 1 second. Is there an online portal to submit application materials? Can't find it in the guidelines. That is underway. We had, as I just mentioned, that's one of those pieces that just based on the time that I started and the time that we were able to get a contractor, we missed the fiscal deadline for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. So we're now working on the 2023-2024 fiscal year. So that's, you know, you could blame me for that, for the delay. So apologies there. And then you said there was a question. Sorry, I'm not monitoring chat. Do you want to read the question?
So Jeff Tillman in the chat asked, what determines that a reimbursement grant is the best way to distribute funding?
Again, as we shared earlier, reimbursement is currently what's written in the statute, and it's not necessarily what we've heard loud and clear that it's the best approach. So we want to make sure that we, as we're listening, you know, we want to share with you that we're doing our due diligence to see how we can work to identify best practices, whether it's, you know, future trailer bill language, or just how other grants are coordinating their processes to be able to deliver on that. There's one more. Sorry. Let me look at the chat. From Cecilia. From a city of, so this is from Cecilia Jimmy. From a City of Fresno employee perspective, we do have the expertise and additional funding to prepare proposals for nonprofits and allow them to administer the grants, since many organizations do not have the resources or expertise to submit proposals that would be approved. Our city agency is going to be able to collaborate with nonprofits so funds are retained and fully utilized in vulnerable communities where there's a great need. So as it currently stands, nonprofit organizations, federally recognized tribes, and organizations that are funded through a fiscal sponsor are eligible entities. There is a component in that the guidelines, and you could look for it, Chloe, where an applicant can partner with a local or responsible entity. And if the city is one of those that the grantee wants to partner with, that's something we could either clarify, but there is something in the guidelines that addresses that component. Laura Jones asked, will you notify us when it becomes available? 100%. I do want the grant management system that we are exploring. We want to get it up and running as well, because it's not only feasible or easy for the applicant, it's also beneficial for the grant reviewers. Internally, Laura, the reviewers, our EJ liaisons, our SEPS teams, our enforcement teams have made it have shared loud and clear with me that having a grant management portal to review applications, to track, to have everything digitized makes it easier on workload, makes it easier to follow timelines and deadlines. So it's not just beneficial to on the public facing side, but internally for the administrative side of things, it is also a benefit to our staff. So yes, we'll make sure to post that once it's available. So thank you for the follow-up question. Other comments? See, actually, there's a question by Carol in the Q&A, and it says, what are the insurance requirements for contracting? For example, will a grantee be required to have a certain amount of liability insurance? And will its subcontractors be required to have the same level? This can also be prohibited for small organizations. This is a great question, and it's something that we need to follow up on, Carol. I'm not sure if it's clarified in the grants guidelines, draft grant guidelines right now. But that's something that we could totally follow up on. For folks that may have joined via the phone or online, again, my name is Moises Moreno Rivera, and I am Cali PA's Deputy for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations. We're currently having this hybrid meeting. We're based right now in Los Angeles at the Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting in the Carmel room. So if any of you are nearby, join us. For phone instructions, for folks that want to provide public comment, we have, you could press *9 to raise your hand. We will then ask you to unmute, and we would press *6 to mute or unmute. This is for folks that are online on the phone. We're taking comments right now, up to 3 minutes to have an equitable distribution for folks that are listening and tuning in. For folks in person, you're able to raise your hand and we'll pass over a mic to you. And yeah, any other comments? We're here to listen and learn to improve our systems.
So Jeff Tillman asked in the chat, is it possible to talk a bit more about the guideline of partnerships with public agencies and nonprofits?
Yeah, one of the things that we heard from the EJ Small Grants Program and some of the identified pieces is, well, Cali PA needs to improve to further advance its mission. You know, there needs to be efforts around enforcement. There needs to be efforts around improved matters on decision making. And if we, how can we then partner, or how can we then connect with the boards, departments, and office of Cali PA or local jurisdictions to ensure that those systems are furthering advancing environmental justice? I know in the tribal affairs realm, we've heard generally from tribes that in order for them to protect water bodies, have cultural protections in water bodies across the state, they need to work with the regional boards. They need to work with the regional boards and their triennial review planning, right, and their basin planning. And they need to have the ability to have clear communication there. So when we were looking at this is how do we create opportunities within these draft guidelines where tribes, where community-based organizations have an opportunity to work with public agencies in this manner. So that's where the intent comes from within the draft guidelines. Other comments, questions? We have about 20 minutes left. We want to make sure that we're listening to best practices. If you worked with a stellar grant program and you think that this program could benefit from it, happy to take those comments. And I want to thank everyone that's here, that's taking time out of the day to be in community with us today. When would the applicant hear about the outcome of their application? So I'm going to go back to our timelines. The clicker's not working. Is it possible to go back to the timeline slide? Got it. So as part of the draft guidelines, we have rolling grant awards as opposed to rolling applications for the first round. We want to make sure that we have concrete rounds for this program, at least how it's written right now in the drafts. And we open solicitation on the 29th of August. And we will then start the team, the internal EJ liaisons, SEPS team, as well as our enforcement units that are working with us to review these applications, to give them some time to sit with the applications and to do a comprehensive review. It will take us about several weeks, but we do intend to make announcements in that rolling basis. So you'll be able to hear from us late September, early October on these guidelines. Sorry, on your application.
And more information on application cycle timelines is in section 4.5 of the draft guidelines.
Ayana, to your question is who would I contact regarding the intellectual property question? I want to make sure you could send that question to the EJ Action Grants and the team itself. So Jamie, if you could put the email on the chat, just so that, and I'll have the team forward that to me. I will also put my email in the chat. And I want to make sure that you have my email for further information.
And I've also taken note of the question, and we'll be typing up an FAQ that will include your question as well.
Other questions?
Laura Jones in the Q&A asked, does this proposal require a SAM ID?
Yeah, that's a system for award management. So it's a US government system, right? Is that what you're referring to? That's a good question. That's something that we need to follow up on. Magali, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, going back to the last question from the, if the SAM.gov is required. I'm going through the guidelines. I'm sorry I did not go through them prior to this meeting, but what I'm seeing is that I'm not sure if you have, are aware of the, which I'm pretty sure you are, but the Justice 40 initiative. And, the funds that are coming through the EPA, we had a meeting yesterday, and the technical assistance will be a huge part for the application process. But I'm just wondering if there can be any connection between you two agencies, state and federal, to get the funding, if possible, the application process through the EPA, and then reimbursement from EJ this grant. Just food for thought.
Can you repeat that again, Magali, please?
Sure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Justice 40 initiative.
Yeah, I am, but to your point on to what are you asking us to consider?
Oh, that maybe there can be some type of collaboration between the Cal EPA and the EPA federal, because they are providing technical assistance, and they do have funds through the EJ funds, environmental justice from the EPA, and they are providing technical assistance, and they can partner with several. There's the collaborative grants. There's different type of funds, solar projects as well, and collaborate, and it has to be for disadvantaged communities, CBOs that are in disadvantaged communities. You're using the CalEnviro screen, but they're using the EPA screen, which is basically, I believe, one fits to the other. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe, because what I see is this is a repayment grant, right? That you have to get funding from another source and then get a repayment. Am I understanding this wrong?
This is a reimbursement grant.
There.
But to your point as to, I do want to make sure that I'm kind of just repeating what you're saying. So what is the request here is that for Cal EPA to reach out to US EPA to see if US EPA could consider, as part of their TA provider grants, if they would be able to consider providing TA to support the grant application for the Cal EPA EJ action grants.
Correct. I mean, or come out of through there. Basically, in that way, you have two routes. You can go through the environmental justice funds for the EPA, apply for a project, and in that project, put another sub-project inside that it can be funded first by the environmental justice CPA funds, and then reimbursed by the California, and then you can use the other funds for another project that was given to you by the EPA funds. Does it make sense?
It does, and that's something that we could follow up with US EPA on to see if that's a possibility, and for them to if it is a possibility, for them to just make that clearer and to be able to state that. I do want to clarify something that you mentioned though about CalEnviro Screen. So CalEnviro Screen is one of the tools that can be used to identify communities as part of this EJ grants program. This was brought up in our first listening session. We want to make sure that projects that are being considered as part of these draft guidelines, that the projects are not limited to a tool if the tool itself is, we want to make sure that you're advancing environmental justice, but we don't want to make sure that if a tool does not apply to you, meaning if you're looking to address urban greening or greening schoolyards, or you're working with a local community, and CalEnviro Screen is one of the tools that you use, but the community the community tool that state parks has, or, you know, the extreme heat tool that exists, right? If those tools are providing a better outlook for you, that you have that flexibility to be able to use that as part of your application. I just want to clarify that we've heard it loud and clear that for some projects, you know, again, I will always defend Cal Enviroscreen. It is my favorite, one of my favorite tools. I use it all the time. I just also understand that for certain communities across the state and for certain projects that are being thought of with communities, it may not be the only tool that you use for your application. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Oh, no, and thank you, because I actually brought this to the EPA because Wilmington was being left out in the modeling for the LA 100 equity strategy by Enroll, due to the fact that when they put the zip code, it actually said that the quality of air was good, and we had horrible, as you know, in Wilmington. And yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And also, I think it's good for I don't know if you're accepting the SB 535 as also for indicators to disadvantaged communities.
Again, we didn't want to be prescriptive on, you know, you must use these. If that's something that you all want us to, you know, to include a list of tools or, you know, different of mapping tools and definitions that we consider. We wanted to be, you know, provide flexibility, but if you're, what you're asking is that we have a very clear indication as to which tools we're considering, is that something that you're asking?
No, I'm saying that thank you for giving the flexibility of using other tools, but there's also, you know, for disadvantaged communities, I use Senate Bill 535, just based on those indicators instead of the Colin Barrett screen. But, you know, I just wanted to thank you for allowing and letting everybody know that there is other there is a flexibility of what you can use to show that the community is a disadvantaged community.
Yeah, and then the team itself, the review team, and kind of how we're thinking is we really want to take a comprehensive review of the project that's being proposed, right? And we want to make sure that the application kind of delivers on that. And if there's one tool that you're using that helps deliver on that application, awesome. If there's a multitude, or if there's an approach that paints a bigger picture on the issues, I understand, you know, for my community, particularly where I grew up in the East Coachella Valley, right? There's a multitude of tools to talk about my community, right? There's, you know, I know that there's groundwater contamination, there's air quality issues, and there's local community air monitoring that's taking place. And if I were to, you know, thinking about just my community in the East Coachella Valley is, you know, what would be the best story to be able to use to apply for these grants? That's something that I have top in mind. Other questions, comments? We have 7 minutes left. Ayana, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. This is being recorded, so where will we be able to find the same conversation if we need a reference at a later date?
It's a really good question. So the first session right now on this, we're currently working on to get the closed captioning for the recording, and we're currently working on that. What we're finding is because it's a 2-hour recording, it's taking a little bit longer than usual. So I do want to make sure that we kind of give that process some time. I believe within the next few weeks or so. And once it becomes available, we want to make sure that we post it on our website, and that would be calepa.ca.gov/EJ Action Grants.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Other questions, comments?
I had one more question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, well, have any other small CBOs or organizations submitted for these grants, and were they actually successful?
So that's a really, really great question. This is a brand new program. This is a brand new program. These are new draft guidelines for a new EJ Action Grants program. Folks may be familiar with Cal EPA's EJ Small Grants program. This is a different funding source. So this is the first time that we're so in short, no other CBOs have applied. And the long answer is because this is brand new.
Got it. Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Again, that's what we're here for. We want to make sure that we provide clarity. Another question came up. Okay, let's look at it. Will there be a list of potential applicants that are looking to partner? And this question is being asked by Lauren Whiskerson. Lauren, is there, if you would provide, is there another grant program that you're working with that does this effectively? The EPA does this? Cool. Is there a link that you could share with us? This would be super, super helpful. If others that are online that, of other programs that do this and you have links, please share those with us. Great, y'all. Well, we have 3 minutes left. This has been quite a very informative listening session. I really, really appreciate learning from all of you, from your experiences, and really, really just thankful to the LA Regional Water Board staff for hosting us and for being here. We want to make sure that you're aware of timelines. So Chloe, if we could go back to the slide. Actually, we're on the slide on timelines. I was like, we are on that slide.
So once again, we are currently in tribal consultation and the public comment period until July 28th. This is our second public listening session, and as current draft guidelines stand, we will be open for grant solicitation August 29th through October 6th. And we have received comment to extend that.
Great, we have. Thank you, Magali, for sending that information. Jamie, one last time, can you put the link and the email, please, for folks on there? I do want to thank everyone for being in community with us today. We're providing you with the website where we'll be updating information. Again, thank you so much for being in community with us today. And any questions, comments, concerns, or any additional public comment, please share with us. We're willing to learn, and we're willing to get things right to remove barriers to our funding. to really further advance environmental justice within the state of California. So I just want to say thank you for all your leadership, your regional leadership, your statewide impact. We couldn't do our job if it wasn't for all the folks on the ground. So on behalf of Cal EPA, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the staff and everyone who have made this possible. So with that, have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to connecting with you. If any of you want to engage, please reach out. So have a great rest of your day. Bye.